we're going to talk about ghosting. This is something that, I don't know, this happens a lot, and it's very, very disappointing. And I think about 10 years ago, the world sort of shifted in the direction of doing this as a commonplace kind of thing. So just so we all know what ghosting is, that's when you apply for a job and you send in your application, and either you never hear anything back, these people don't respond to communication, or you have already initiated some kind of exchange with the recruiter or the hiring manager or the receptionist or somebody on the other end, and you're having a back and forth kind of exchange over emails or voicemail or some other means of communication, and they just stop. They just drop off the face of the planet and never respond to you again. That's ghosting. These people just disappear. And as I said, if you have experienced that, it turns out you're normal, because this is now a very common practice. This did not used to be the case, but it's the case now. And in fact, I would say that you can expect this as a regular thing if you are a candidate that's applying to many jobs, especially if you're dealing with recruiters. This is really kind of how people operate. It's very surprising and very disappointing. And if you're new at this, or you're young and you don't have a lot of experience job searching, you might be thrown by this. You might think like, oh my God, is something wrong with me? Or am I just dealing with really weird people? Or what's the deal? The answer is there's nothing wrong with you. And you could be dealing with some weird people, but as it turns out, a lot of regular people behave like this too, apparently. So that's not necessarily the case. For those of you that you're not in careers like sales, okay, this is more of a known quantity to people who work in sales and stuff. You know, you throw a lot of stuff out there, and the default response is silence. The exception is where you hear something back, right? Either positive or negative. It's an exception to the rule if you get a response. That's how things usually work in things like sales. In the world of networking, that's also kind of a thing, right? You could propose something, you could invite people to an event or whatever, and if you don't receive a response, that's generally understood to be a soft no, okay? People will respond if they choose to accept or to engage or to go deeper with you, but generally the way they operate is that that's just a standard way of saying no. And that is known, and it is accepted, and it is even built into the etiquette and protocol of these interactions. So if you're coming from that world, you will understand this, and you will know to expect it, and you know what it means. If you're new at this, this might kind of throw you, because if you think that this is kind of an unprofessional way to behave, I can't tell you you're wrong. It is basically an unprofessional way to behave, especially to people who are not expecting that kind of treatment. They don't move in circles where they would encounter this type of behavior pattern. So that's ghosting. So hopefully everybody understands what ghosting is now. There's other kinds of ways that people will do this. I call it soft ghosting. If they've ever given you a response saying the position is on hold, right? If you've ever heard that one before, I know a lot of you have. You apply for a job, they say we're accepting applications, you send your application in using the channel that they told you to send it to, right? So they give you an email address or whatever, you send your application to that email address, and either you get a response saying it's on hold, or when you follow up with it, people say I'm sorry, the position is on hold. You might have come down for a couple of interviews by this point. You've already gone in for a job interview, and maybe the process is they do 1, 2, 3 or more rounds of job interviews. That is a thing for a lot of jobs, especially higher level jobs. So you might have already done an interview. And the natural thing to do would be to contact the recruiter and say, thank you for having me come down for an interview. I appreciated that. It was a pleasure meeting you guys. And if you should need any information, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I'm just wondering if I will be hearing from you in the near future, something like that. That would be a sort of default kind of message you might send in. But then you find that these people drop off the face of the planet. They don't respond. You might try and get them on the phone. They don't respond. They're always unavailable. You might leave a voice message or several voice messages. They never respond, right? That's ghosting, right? So this is common. Or if they do ghost, they say something like, I'm sorry, the position is on hold, or something equally cryptic, which doesn't really make sense to you. That can be a form of soft ghosting. They're still there, but they're unresponsive. Okay? Now, first of all, I think I know what a lot of people are going to say is that that's unprofessional. And yes, it is. I agree with you. Usually only at lower level jobs, you encounter this behavior. If you're going for like, an upper middle management type position, most of the time they won't treat you like this. Usually people at those levels tend to be a little bit more professional. The first thing I want you to know is that if any of this sounds familiar to you, you have done nothing wrong, okay? There is nothing you should be reading into their response that indicates to you that there's something wrong with you, or there's something about your qualifications or anything you have on your resume that's a problem. There's nothing about the method you're choosing to communicate with or over. None of that is an issue, okay? So if that's what you're thinking, I'm here to tell you that you're deriving the wrong conclusion from it. This is just, something else is going on. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And I also want to say that sometimes you may have dodged a bullet. So don't feel too bad about it, because there are a lot of awful employers out there, and there's a lot of awful recruiters out there. Some of them are very, very good. Some more of them are decent, and even more are, in my experience, pretty bad and unprofessional. So it might not necessarily be a bad thing. It may not feel like it, but it could be a blessing in disguise. I just want to throw that out there. I want to briefly respond to a couple of comments here. Thank you guys for getting in the chat. Hello to Bob. Julia says, hi, Bill. Your videos helped me land a job as a lab technician 2 years ago. Thank you. Well, you're absolutely welcome, Julia. And thank you for letting me know that. It's good to get feedback on these things. Congratulations. Bob says, in the late 90s, I get ghosted by a large corporation after my interviews. After that, I just expected never to hear from anyone ever again after each interaction with a prospective employer. Yeah, if you're prepared to not hear anything back, I think you're going to be fine. I think that's a reasonable expectation. I wouldn't say you can expect never to hear back as a default thing all the time, but if you are okay not hearing anything back, you're not going through all kinds of mental turmoil over it, I think you've got the right idea. Julia says, I agree with you. It's most often not about the applicant. It's the employer's own problem. Yes, it is. It's the way they operate. Okay, so we're going to get back into the chat in a second, but I just want to finish off an overview of this. A couple of things everybody needs to know about ghosting, okay? If you knew what was happening on the other end, you would feel a lot better about being ghosted. You would realize that it's not any kind of statement that you're doing something wrong, or that you're unemployable, or that you don't have any value, or that it's inappropriate to apply for these jobs. You would realize that none of that stuff is true, okay? Usually what's going on, especially these days when you apply for a job that's posted on the internet, first of all, some of those jobs are actually fake. I'm not sure exactly how many. It could be 30%, it could be less, it depends who you talk to. But they're not actually real jobs, so they're not going to respond. They're playing some little game. They're trying to see who's out there, who's looking for jobs. There's other more nefarious stuff. So some of them, like those, obviously, you're probably not going to hear back from. So obviously that's no reflection on you. Then, of the legitimate jobs that are out there, that are posted on the internet, okay, because it's so easy generally speaking, to apply for a job on the internet, you get a lot of applicants, okay? Think about it. You could apply for many jobs in a day. And if you did that every day, you could apply to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs easily. So a lot of people are out there doing that. A lot of times they're applying for jobs that they're completely not qualified for at all, right? Like it's just a sort of nuisance application because this person doesn't even have one of the things that they asked for in the list of requirements, right? So that is a thing. That's also what's going on. So because of that, the recruiters are getting a huge volume of applications. Now, some of them choose to handle that with an automated computer system that takes the applications and does the initial filter, okay? Sometimes these systems are semi-intelligent and they can respond with a default email. You can program all that in and they can do it. Sometimes that feature is there, but people don't use it. Sometimes the feature is not there, okay? It depends how you do it. Other times, the recruiter doesn't go through that type of software known as ATS software. Sometimes it just goes to somebody's inbox and their inbox can get overwhelmed, especially in smaller companies. This is a thing. So it's, if you ever gotten, 200 emails in a day, you know what I'm talking about. It's very hard to stay on top of. And what some people do is they will just, look at your email for like literally 5 seconds and then decide what to do with it, whether it gets rejected or it gets processed further. So you're getting all of these things happening on the other end. But the point is that you're going in with a lot of competition, okay? Posted jobs get a lot of candidates applying. And because of that, that's what's directly and indirectly led to the situation where the recruiter ghosting a candidate is very common, okay? If 500 candidates apply for a job, and you're one of those 500 candidates, statistically, you have a 0.2% chance of getting the job, right? If you're up against 499 other people, you have a 1 in 500 chance statistically of getting that job, right? Now, obviously there are other factors, but that gives you an idea of like the starting point for this, okay? Some people will have a higher chance because they're more qualified. Other people will have a lower chance, but you see what you're up against, okay? So that's why, you usually don't hear back. Now, I've gotten the question before, should I contact someone else at the organization? And I did a video years ago on my channel where I talked about my personal experience doing this years ago, where I actually did get a job, but I was ghosted a couple of times. It was a sort of hiring process from hell. I did 9 interviews with a company. That's not normal and that's not typical. But it was a case of I got ghosted halfway through the process, and it turns out that the recruiter that was in the process of recruiting me left the company halfway through the process, didn't say a word to me. So they weren't there anymore. So I did contact the company and I did find this out and I did continue the process with somebody else. So that's an example of the types of things that can happen. But the most likely scenario is that you should not follow up with somebody else at the company. It's not the best use of your time. The only time I would ever recommend that is if this is like a dream job that you're really into and you want to go absolutely as far as you go with this, then maybe. But as a standard procedure, it's not worth trying to, if you're ghosted, trying to contact the company and try and, talk to somebody else. That's what I would say. The reality is that sometimes, and I'm not making excuses for recruiters, but it sometimes can be very impractical to respond to every applicant with an email that says no in a semi-tactful way. It's just not practical. Recruiters are hired and they work multiple positions at once, and each of those positions is getting hundreds of candidates, and it's just not practical to respond to everyone. So I hate to say this, but don't expect a response. Okay, they've received your application. Either they're incompetent or they're not, but either way, that's all you should do. What you should do for yourself is move on and pursue other opportunities, including opportunities that don't involve posted jobs on the internet. Okay, there are many ways to get a job. Make sure you're doing more than one thing.